a widowed veteran, a single dad, a man who thought his battles were behind him. But when a powerful CEO walks into a small town full of anger and fear, he becomes her only shield against danger. One moment of courage sparks a bond, neither expected, but what starts as protection soon turns into something far deeper. Whispers in the shadows, sabotage in the mill, and a truth powerful enough to destroy them both. She's a leader with everything to prove. He's a father with everything to lose. And together, they must face the fight of their lives. But when the world pits them against each other, will protecting her cost him his future, or bring them both the love they never thought they'd find? What happens when the one man who saves you becomes the one man you can't live without? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Eden's Ford Town Square, glinting off the weathered brick facade of the old textile mill. Janelle Whitaker stood at a makeshift podium on the temporary stage, her dark blazer and simple pearl necklace chosen carefully to bridge the gap between corporate authority and small-town accessibility. She gripped the edges of the wooden podium, scanning the faces of nearly 200 townspeople gathered before her. "I know change is scary," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "But I'm not here to shut down what's left or strip away what matters. I'm here to bring the heart of Eden's Ford back to life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed glimmers of hope, but others wore masks of doubt and suspicion. Near the back, Caleb Reed stood quietly, work boots planted firmly on the cracked concrete. He'd come to bid on the security fence contract, but something in Janelle's earnest determination made him linger. "The mill will reopen with full safety upgrades," Janelle continued, holding up detailed renderings. "We're planning to hire locally, with priority given to former employees. Training programs." "Like we haven't heard that before," a voice shouted from the crowd. "Outside suits always have big promises." Janelle took a deep breath. "I understand your skepticism, but I'm not just any outside suit. My father worked the mills in Georgia for 30 years. I watched communities like this one struggle, and I've spent my career learning how to bring them back the right way." The crowd shifted uneasily. Near the edge, a group of younger men began pushing forward, their faces tight with anger. Caleb straightened, his military-trained instincts picking up the change in atmosphere. "My commitment is to this town," Janelle pressed on, "to sustainable jobs, fair wages, and—" A brick sailed through the air, shattering one of the mill's ground floor windows with a crash that made the crowd gasp and scatter. Before anyone could react, a masked figure broke from the group of angry young men and charged toward the stage. Caleb moved without hesitation. His long legs carried him to the stage in 3 strides. He positioned himself between Janelle and the attacker, one arm sweeping her behind him while the other caught the masked man's rushing momentum. With practiced efficiency, Caleb redirected the charge, taking the assailant to the ground in a controlled takedown that spoke of years of MP training. "Easy now, son," Caleb said firmly, maintaining his hold while keeping his weight measured. The masked man struggled briefly, then went still. Several police officers pushed through the dispersing crowd. Caleb noticed Janelle hadn't run. She stood steady beside him, though he could see her hands trembling slightly. "Everyone back up. Give us some space," Caleb called out, his deep voice carrying natural authority that had the remaining onlookers stepping back. Officer Martinez reached them first. "Got him secure?" "Yes, ma'am," Caleb answered. "Though I think we need to see who we're dealing with here." He carefully removed the mask, and his heart sank. The angry young face that emerged was all too familiar. Darren Pike, barely 19, a boy he'd tried to mentor last year before the kid had pulled away. "Darren?" Caleb kept his voice level, though disappointment and concern warred in his chest. "What were you thinking?" The teenager's defiance crumbled slightly at Caleb's tone. "You don't understand. These people, they just want to use us and leave us worse than before." "No, son," Caleb said quietly. "What I understand is you just assaulted a woman trying to bring jobs back to your mama's town." He looked up at Officer Martinez. "If Miss Whitaker agrees, I'd like to talk to Darren before any charges are filed. I know this boy. He's better than this." Janelle stepped forward, her composure restored. "I won't press charges if he's willing to have that conversation." She met Darren's sullen gaze. "I'd rather understand why you're so angry than punish you for it." Officer Martinez nodded. We'll need statements, but we can start there. She helped Darren to his feet while another officer secured him. As the crowd continued to disperse, Janelle turned to Caleb. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who believed in second chances. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the protection, but for seeing hope where others might only see trouble. Caleb nodded, suddenly aware of his work-worn clothes and the dirt on his boots. Just did what needed doing, ma'am, though I'm supposed to be here bidding on your security fence, not playing security guard. A ghost of a smile touched Janelle's lips. Maybe we should talk about both. She glanced at where the officers were leading Darren away. Something tells me you understand this town and its people better than any outside security firm would. Caleb watched the last of the crowd leaving, considering her words. The late afternoon light caught the broken glass on the ground, scattering rainbow fragments across the concrete. Beautiful, despite the damage, like hope breaking through fear. Police sirens wailed through the town square, their piercing sound gradually fading as two officers led a handcuffed Darren Pike toward their cruiser. The 17-year-old's head hung low, his earlier bravado replaced by visible fear. Caleb Reed's steady voice cut through the chaos. Officers, hold up a minute. Caleb's calm authority drew their attention. He walked over, his movements measured and deliberate. I know this young man. Let me talk to him first. The officers exchanged glances, clearly recognizing Caleb from his years of military police service. Reed, this isn't a simple misdemeanor. He attacked the mill's CEO. Janelle watched from the stage, her heart still racing from the attack. The way Caleb carried himself, confident yet compassionate, caught her attention. He spoke quietly with the officers, his broad shoulders blocking the evening sun. I mentored Darren last summer through the church program, Caleb explained. He's not violent by nature. Something else is going on here. He turned to face Darren directly. Isn't that right, son? Darren's shoulders trembled. I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. They said it would just be a peaceful protest. I didn't mean to... His voice cracked. Caleb placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Officers, give me 2 weeks with him. Let me work with him again. Get him back on track. If he steps out of line even once, I'll bring him in myself. The older officer sighed, pulling out his keys. Your word still means something in this town, Reed. Don't make us regret this. He uncuffed Darren, who rubbed his wrists and avoided everyone's eyes. Janelle descended from the stage, her heels clicking against the wooden steps. Her phone buzzed insistently, likely board members demanding updates. She silenced it, more interested in the scene unfolding before her. Thank you, Mr. Reed, she said, approaching the group. That was quite impressive. Both the intervention during the attack and this. Caleb turned, meeting her gaze with quiet intensity. Ma'am, I apologize for the welcome you've received. This isn't who we are as a town. Before Janelle could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, she glanced at the screen. 3 urgent messages from board members. With a slight frown, she excused herself and stepped away to take the call. Janelle, the incident is already on social media. Marcus, the board chair, spoke rapidly. We need to show strength immediately. Hire professional security, preferably from outside the area. We can't risk appearing vulnerable. She watched as Caleb spoke softly to Darren, the teen's defensive posture gradually relaxing. I understand the concern, Marcus, but I'm actually considering a different approach. This isn't the time for small-town sentiment, another board member cut in. Your safety is paramount. Janelle straightened her spine. Exactly. And I believe I've found exactly who we need. She ended the call despite their protests, her decision crystallizing as she observed Caleb's natural ability to diffuse tension. The square had emptied, except for a few lingering observers. Darren's mother arrived, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her son. Caleb stepped back, giving them space, but his presence remained protective, watchful. Dad! A young girl's voice rang out as Ava Reed ran across the square, her backpack bouncing. She crashed into her father's side, brown ponytail swinging. Mrs. Martinez from next door said there was trouble at the mill. Are you okay? Caleb's entire demeanor softened as he hugged his daughter. I'm fine, sweetheart, just helping sort out a misunderstanding. Ava's bright eyes found Janelle. Are you the lady from the mill? Dad says you're trying to bring jobs back. Ava, Caleb warned gently. but Janelle smiled. Yes, I am. Your father helped me out of a tough spot today. Janelle glanced at her watch, then made her decision. Mr. Reed, would you mind stopping by my office? I'd like to discuss something with you. 20 minutes later, they sat in what would become Janelle's office, the room still dusty from disuse. Ava had settled in a corner with her homework, occasionally glancing up with obvious curiosity. I'll be direct, Janelle began. I need someone who understands both security and this community. Someone who can bridge the gap between what this mill represents and what the town needs. I'd like to offer you a temporary position as our security advisor and community liaison. Caleb shifted in his chair, uncertainty crossing his features. Miss Whitaker, please call me Janelle. Janelle, he corrected. I appreciate the offer, but I'm just a handyman these days. My security experience is years behind me. Dad, Ava piped up from her corner. You should help the lady. You always say we should help people who are trying to do good things. A hint of a smile touched Caleb's lips. He looked at his daughter, then back to Janelle. She has a way of cutting through excuses. Smart girl, Janelle responded, feeling more certain by the minute. What happened today showed me that standard corporate security isn't what we need. We need someone who knows this town's heart, someone the people trust. That's you, Mr. Reed. Caleb, he offered, meeting her gaze. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. All right. Temporary position, starting tomorrow? Tomorrow, Janelle agreed, relief washing over her. She stood and extended her hand. As Caleb shook it, his grip firm and steady, she knew she'd made the right choice. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway. As Caleb's weathered pickup truck pulled up to their modest ranch-style home, Ava bounced in her seat, her eyes sparkling with mischief. So, Dad, she drawled, drawing out the word. Are we going to talk about how you swooped in like a superhero to save Ms. Whitaker? Caleb shook his head, a slight smile tugging at his lips. It wasn't like that, sweetheart. I just did what needed doing. Right. Ava rolled her eyes dramatically. Just like in those old movies where the knight rescues the damsel in distress? Ms. Whitaker is hardly a damsel in distress, Caleb said, pulling his keys from the ignition. She's a capable businesswoman who— His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his defense. The caller ID made his eyebrows rise. Janelle Whitaker. Speaking of, he murmured, answering the call. Ms. Whitaker, please, call me Janelle. Her warm voice came through. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, but I wondered if we could meet privately. There are some details about the security position I'd like to discuss. Caleb glanced at his watch, then at Ava, who was practically vibrating with curiosity. Well, I'm just getting home with my daughter. Oh, would it be inappropriate to stop by? I could bring dinner as a thank you for today. Before Caleb could respond, Ava snatched the phone from his hand. We'd love to have you over, Miss Whitaker. Dad makes the best sweet tea in town. Ava Reed, Caleb protested, but he could hear Janelle's delighted laughter through the speaker. Well, that settles it, Janelle said. Text me your address. I'll bring over some food in about an hour. After ending the call, Caleb looked at his grinning daughter. Young lady, we need to talk about phone etiquette. Dad, we need to talk about cleaning the living room before your date gets here. It's not a— Caleb stopped himself, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Just help me straighten up, please. An hour later, their small home was as presentable as they could make it. Caleb had changed into a fresh button-down shirt, and Ava had insisted on setting their worn dining table with their fancy plates, the ones usually reserved for Christmas dinner. The doorbell rang, and Ava sprinted to answer it before Caleb could move. Janelle stood on their porch, holding several bags of takeout from the local diner. She'd changed, too, trading her business suit for a casual blouse and slacks. Ms. Whitaker, Ava beamed. Did you really bring us Mr. Jimmy's fried chicken? Ava, Caleb warned gently, appearing behind her. Let our guest come inside first. Please, it's Janelle, she smiled, stepping into their home. And yes, I did bring Mr. Jimmy's. I heard it's the best in town. It is. Ava bounced on her toes. So, what's it like being a CEO? Do you have a big office? How many people work for you? Can you fire anyone you want? Ava Reed. Caleb's face flushed with embarrassment. That's enough questions. But Janelle laughed, the sound rich and genuine. It's quite all right. Why don't we set up dinner, and I'll answer all your questions. As they arranged the food on the table, Ava continued her interrogation, and Janelle answered each question with patience and humor. Caleb watched, something warm settling in his chest, as Janelle explained corporate responsibility in terms his 12-year-old could understand. Being a CEO is like being a captain of a really big ship, Janelle explained, passing the mashed potatoes. You have to make sure everyone's working together, heading in the right direction, and most importantly, that nobody falls overboard. Is that why you want Dad to help? To keep people from falling overboard? Janelle's eyes met Caleb's across the table. Something like that. Your father has a way of making people feel safe and heard. That's a rare gift. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, their modest dining room filled with laughter and stories. Caleb found himself relaxing, surprised by how natural it felt to have Janelle there. As the meal wound down, Ava helped clear the plates, then leaned close to whisper something in Janelle's ear. Caleb watched Janelle's expression soften, her eyes growing tender as she listened. What secrets are you two sharing? He asked, half joking. Nothing, Daddy, Ava said innocently, but her eyes twinkled with mischief. Later, as Janelle prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Thank you both for having me. This was wonderful. Thank you for dinner, Caleb replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the narrow entryway. And thank you for sharing that about your father, Janelle said softly to Ava. It helps me understand him better. Caleb raised an eyebrow. What exactly did you share, young lady? Ava grinned. Just that you pretend to be all tough, but you sing church hymns when you're sad, like when you miss Mom. A moment of silence fell, heavy with unspoken emotion. Caleb's throat tightened, but Janelle's gentle smile held no judgment, only understanding. Good night, Caleb, she said softly. Good night, Ava. Thank you for letting me into your home. As they watched her car pull away, Ava leaned against her father's side. I like her, Dad. She doesn't treat me like I'm just a kid. Caleb wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders, thinking about the evening, about Janelle's laugh, about the way she'd listened to Ava with genuine interest. No, he agreed quietly. No, she doesn't. The morning air hung crisp and cool as Janelle strode across the mill's parking lot, her heels clicking against the worn asphalt. Her mind was already racing with the day's tasks, meeting with suppliers, reviewing safety protocols, planning community outreach. The events from yesterday's protest still weighed heavy, but she refused to let fear derail her mission. She stopped short when she reached her car. There, stuck beneath the windshield wiper, was a piece of paper that hadn't been there when she arrived. Her heart skipped a beat as she plucked it free. The message, cut from newspaper letters and pasted in a crooked line, read, "Go home or else." Janelle's hands trembled slightly as she read the words again. She glanced around the empty lot, suddenly aware of how alone she was. The mill's weathered brick walls loomed silent and watching. The crunch of gravel made her spin around. Caleb was walking toward her, a thermos in one hand and a folder of security plans in the other. He noticed her tension immediately, his easy stride shifting to alert watchfulness. Ms. Whitaker, everything okay? She tried to tuck the note into her purse. I'm fine, Mr. Reed. Just getting an early start. Ma'am, I've been an MP long enough to know when something's wrong. His voice was gentle but firm. What's that paper you're holding? Janelle straightened her shoulders, professional mask sliding into place. It's nothing I can't handle. I've dealt with worse in corporate boardrooms. Caleb stepped closer, his presence steady and grounding. Maybe so, but you shouldn't have to handle it alone. May I see? After a moment's hesitation, she handed him the note. His jaw tightened as he read it, eyes scanning the parking lot with practiced efficiency. I'm driving you home, he said, no room for argument in his tone. That's not necessary. I have meetings all day and they can wait. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police to file a report, then checking your house myself. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the safety of everyone involved in reopening this mill. Janelle felt frustration bubble up. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not some helpless woman who needs... Never said you were helpless. His eyes met hers, direct and honest. But being strong doesn't mean you have to be alone. Let me do my job. The simple sincerity in his voice made her pause. She thought of her father, who'd always taught her that true strength meant knowing when to accept help. Fine, she conceded, handing him her car keys. But I need to grab my laptop first. While Janelle gathered her things from her office, Caleb made calls, first to the police, then to a security company he trusted. She watched from her window as he methodically photographed the note and checked the surrounding area for evidence. The drive to her house was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Caleb's presence filled the car with a steady calm that seemed to push back against the morning's ugliness. He kept his eyes moving, checking mirrors, noting any cars that stayed behind them too long. At her house, a Victorian-style home she'd chosen for its wraparound porch, Caleb insisted on checking every room, every window, every possible entry point. Janelle followed him, alternating between appreciation and mild annoyance at his thoroughness. "Your back door lock is weak," he said, jiggling the handle. "And these windows need better latches. I know a good locksmith." "I can call one myself," Janelle said, then softened her tone. "But thank you." Caleb nodded, making notes on his phone. "I'll have cameras installed at the mill today, and I'd like to set up some preliminary security protocols, if you're willing to hear them out." Looking at his serious expression, Janelle felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about protection. It was about someone genuinely caring what happened to her and her vision for the mill. "I'll clear my afternoon," she said. "We can review them together." That evening, after a day of security upgrades and careful planning, Janelle stood at her office window. The sun had set, leaving the mill grounds bathed in shadow and security lights. Below, Caleb's figure moved methodically through his patrol, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She watched him check doors, inspect fences, and test the new security cameras. His movements were precise and professional, but there was something more. A sense of personal investment in keeping this place, and its people, safe. Janelle pressed her hand against the cool glass, surprised by the calm settling over her. The threatening note lay in an evidence bag on her desk, but its power to frighten had diminished. For the first time since her divorce, since taking on this massive project, she felt truly protected. Not because she couldn't protect herself, but because someone else cared enough to stand guard with her. Below, Caleb's flashlight beam swung up toward her window. He touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a casual salute, then continued his rounds, steady and vigilant in the gathering night. The late morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Grace Community Church, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. As the last notes of Amazing Grace faded away, people began filing out of the sanctuary, their voices a gentle murmur of Sunday conversation. Janelle stood near the entrance, smoothing her navy dress and exchanging polite smiles with those who passed by. Some nodded warmly, others averted their eyes. The divide was clear, even here in God's house. Marisol Alvarez approached, her silver-streaked hair neat beneath a modest hat, a weathered Bible tucked under her arm. "Miss Whitaker," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of fresh-baked bread. "I've been thinking about our situation. Please, call me Janelle," she replied, touched by the older woman's gentle presence. "And I'm all ears. We need all the wisdom we can get right now." Marisol guided her to a quiet corner near the church bulletin board. "What we need is to listen," she said, gesturing to the empty church hall through an open door. "This space, it's neutral ground, sacred ground. Why not hold a listening circle here? Let people speak their minds, share their fears." Caleb, who had been chatting with the pastor nearby, overheard and joined them. He wore a pressed blue shirt and khakis, looking different from his usual work clothes but no less steady. "That's actually a solid idea," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "People need to feel heard before they can start healing." "Exactly," Marisol agreed. "And the church hall has hosted town meetings for generations. It's where we gathered during the flood of '98, the mill layoffs in '8. It's where we come together when times are hard." Janelle looked between them, considering. Her corporate training urged caution. Unstructured meetings could spiral into chaos. But something in her gut, maybe the same instinct that had led her to Eden's Ford in the first place, told her this was right. "When can we do it?" she asked. "This afternoon," Marisol said firmly. "After Sunday dinner, I'll make some calls. Spread the word." 2 hours later, the church hall hummed with tension as people filed in. Metal chairs scraped against the linoleum floor as workers, their families, and other townspeople took seats in a large circle. The smell of coffee from ancient percolators mingled with lingering incense from the morning service. Janelle sat straight-backed, but not stiff, trying to project both authority and openness. Caleb had positioned himself a few chairs away, close enough to help if needed, far enough to show this was her meeting. Marisol moved around the circle, offering coffee and her signature oatmeal cookies, her presence somehow both motherly and commanding. "Let's begin with a prayer," Marisol suggested, and heads bowed automatically. Her simple words asked for open hearts and peaceful spirits. But peace felt distant when Eli Thompson, a third-generation mill worker, spoke first. "My daddy worked that mill for 40 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "His daddy before him. Now you come in here talking about modernization and efficiency. Sounds like corporate speak for cutting our jobs." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the circle. "And what about wages?" Sarah Chin from accounting added. "We've heard rumors about pay cuts to fund all these fancy new machines." Janelle felt the weight of their fears, their anger. She started to respond with prepared talking points about market competitiveness and sustainable business models. But Caleb cleared his throat softly. When she glanced his way, he gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. His eyes seemed to say, "Just be real with them." Taking a deep breath, Janelle set aside her CEO persona. "You're right to be worried," she said simply. "Change is scary. I know because I grew up watching my own father lose his job when his factory closed. He never recovered from that blow, and neither did our family." The room grew quiet, listening. "I'm not here to destroy what you've built," she continued. "I'm here because I believe this mill can have a future, one that honors its past while creating new opportunities. Yes, we need some modernization to compete, but I promise you this. Every decision will be made with transparency. You'll know what's coming, why it's necessary, and how it affects you." She met Eli's eyes directly. "I can't guarantee it will be easy, but I can guarantee you'll never be left in the dark. We'll face whatever comes together." Marisol's hand found its way to Janelle's shoulder, warm and supportive. Around the circle, tense shoulders began to relax slightly. Even Eli's scowl softened into something more contemplative. A younger worker raised her hand. "Could we maybe see the modernization plans? Understand what's actually being proposed?" "Absolutely," Janelle answered. "I'll set up detailed presentations for each department next week. Every question gets answered." "And safety protocols?" another voice asked. "With all these changes coming, that's actually why Mr. Reed is here." Janelle gestured toward Caleb. "He'll be overseeing all safety measures during the transition. Nothing moves forward until he signs off on it." Caleb nodded, his quiet presence lending weight to her words. "Safety first," he said simply. "No exceptions." As the meeting continued, more voices joined in, some worried, some hopeful, all gradually shifting from confrontation to conversation. Marisol circulated with fresh coffee, her gentle touches and knowing looks helping to ease the atmosphere. Caleb watched it all with careful attention, noting how the townspeople's body language changed. Crossed arms loosened, furrowed brows smoothed. When Janelle spoke about creating apprenticeship opportunities for local youth, he saw several parents exchange interested glances. The afternoon light was growing golden when Marisol finally suggested they wrap up. As people began to rise, many lingered to speak with Janelle one-on-one. The conversations were still cautious, but the bitter edge had softened. Some even smiled as they thanked her for listening. The evening sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as Janelle's car pulled up to a modest two-story house with peeling white paint and a well-worn porch. Wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze, and a rocking chair swayed slightly, its aged wood creaking. "This is it," Caleb said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Eli Turner's been in this house for 40 years, helped negotiate 3 union contracts back when the mill was running strong." Janelle gripped the steering wheel, taking a deep breath. "Any advice before we go in?" "Just be straight with him. Eli can smell corporate double talk a mile away." Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. "He may be rough around the edges, but he cares about these people more than anyone." They walked up the creaky steps together. Before either could knock, the screen door swung open. Eli Turner stood there, tall and weathered, his gray hair wild and untamed. His sharp eyes moved from Janelle to Caleb, narrowing slightly. "Well, if it ain't the CEO and her new watchdog," he said, his voice gravelly. "Come on in then. Let's hear what you got to say." The living room was neat, but cluttered with memories. Union meeting notices yellowed with age, family photos, and an old hard hat displayed prominently on a shelf. Eli gestured to a worn plaid couch while he settled into a leather recliner that had clearly been his throne for many years. "Mr. Turner," Janelle began, "I wanted to—" "Save the formalities," Eli cut in. "You're here because you need the old Union man's blessing. That about right?" His weathered hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "I'm here because you know this community better than anyone," Janelle replied evenly. "And because I believe in doing things face to face." Eli's laugh was sharp. "Face to face? Like when corporate types shut down the mill 3 years ago? They didn't even have the guts to look us in the eye. Just sent letters and security guards." Caleb shifted forward slightly. "Things are different now, Eli. Ms. Whitaker—" "And you?" Eli turned his stern gaze to Caleb. "Never thought I'd see the day when Caleb Reed would play security guard for the suits. What happened to the man who used to stand with us at the gates?" "I stand with what's right," Caleb said quietly. "Always have." Janelle placed her portfolio on the coffee table. "Mr. Turner, I have our proposed wage scales, safety protocols, and training programs. Everything's open for discussion." "Discussion?" Eli stood up suddenly, his voice rising. "Like there was discussion when they cut our health care? Or discussion when they sold our pension fund?" He pointed a finger at Janelle. "You outsiders come in here with your fancy words and promises, but you don't know what it's like to watch a whole town lose hope." The room crackled with tension. Caleb's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Janelle stood up. "You're right," she said softly. Eli blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You're right. I don't know what it was like. I wasn't here." Janelle's voice was steady but vulnerable. "I can't undo what others did to this town. I don't have all the answers, and I won't pretend that I do." She stepped closer to Eli, meeting his suspicious gaze. "But I give you my word. Everything I do will be in the open. No backroom deals, no hidden agendas. If you think I'm wrong about something, my door is always open. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove that not every business leader is your enemy." Silence filled the room. Eli studied her face for a long moment, then looked at the old hard hat on his shelf. His shoulders seemed to drop slightly. "Fine words," he said finally, his voice gruff but slightly softer. "We'll see if they mean anything." He picked up the portfolio from the table. "I'll look these over. Can't promise anything more than that. That's all I ask," Janelle replied. As they walked back to the car in the cool evening air, Caleb glanced at Janelle. Her face was calm, but he could see the emotional toll the confrontation had taken. He'd watched her stand her ground with grace and honesty, refusing to fight fire with fire. Something stirred in his chest, respect, admiration, and maybe something more that he wasn't ready to name. "You did good in there," he said simply. Janelle looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "I just hope it's enough." Morning light streamed through the tall windows of Janelle's mill office, catching dust motes that danced in the air. She sat behind her desk, fingers drumming thoughtfully on a stack of papers while Caleb stood by the window, his reflection ghosting against the glass. "An apprenticeship program?" Caleb turned from the window, his expression curious. "Yes." Janelle's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "We need skilled workers for the reopening, and this town needs hope. What better way than to give our young people a chance?" Caleb nodded slowly, crossing his arms as he considered her words. "You're thinking about Darren, among others." She stood up and walked around her desk. "But yes, he's exactly the kind of young person I had in mind. Someone with potential who just needs a door opened." "He's got natural talent with machines," Caleb said softly. "Used to help me fix my truck. Kid can diagnose an engine problem just by listening to it." Janelle smiled. "That's exactly what we need. But," she perched on the edge of her desk, "will he accept? After what happened at the protest?" "Let me talk to him," Caleb offered. His voice carried a quiet confidence that made Janelle's tension ease. "He's been avoiding me since that day, but I know where to find him." Later that afternoon, Caleb pulled his truck into the parking lot of Mike's auto shop. Sure enough, Darren was there, half hidden under a beat-up Chevy, only his legs visible from beneath the chassis. "Need a hand under there?" Caleb called out. There was a sharp clang followed by a muffled curse. Darren rolled out on the creeper, grease smeared across his forehead. When he saw Caleb, his face clouded with shame. "Mr. Reed." Darren quickly got to his feet, wiping his hands on a rag. "I was just doing what you do best," Caleb finished for him. Working with machines. Darren's shoulders hunched. Look, about what happened at the mill. That's not why I'm here. Caleb leaned against a workbench. Though, we should talk about it sometime. Right now, I've got an opportunity for you. I don't deserve any opportunities, Darren muttered, turning away to organize tools that didn't need organizing. Says who? Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. Last I checked, God's in the business of second chances. So is Miss Whitaker. That got Darren's attention. He turned back, confusion clear on his young face. Miss Whitaker? The lady I tried to... He couldn't finish the sentence. The same. Caleb picked up a wrench, examined it. She's starting an apprenticeship program at the mill. Needs someone who understands machinery, someone willing to learn. And she wants me? Darren's voice cracked with disbelief. After what I did? Sometimes the people who've made mistakes are the ones who work hardest to prove themselves. Caleb set down the wrench. Remember that carburetor we rebuilt last summer? Darren nodded slowly. You stripped 3 bolts trying to rush it. But instead of giving up, you spent hours figuring out how to extract them properly. That's the kind of determination the mill needs. But everyone in town knows what I did. Darren's voice was barely above a whisper. Then show them who you really are. Caleb stepped closer, put a hand on Darren's shoulder. That protest? That wasn't you. The real Darren Pike is the kid who stayed after hours to help Mrs. Johnson with her brake lights. Wouldn't take a dime for it. Tears welled in Darren's eyes. He quickly wiped them away with his sleeve. You really think I could do it? I know you can. Caleb squeezed his shoulder. But you've got to want it. 7 a.m. tomorrow if you're interested. Wear sturdy boots and bring that good attitude I remember. The next morning, Caleb arrived early at the mill, coffee in hand. He paced the parking lot, checking his watch every few minutes. At 6:55 a.m., a familiar figure appeared, walking quickly down the street. Darren wore clean work clothes, a tool belt slung low on his hips. His boots were old but freshly polished. He'd even gotten a haircut. Morning, Mr. Reed, he said, trying to sound casual despite his obvious nervousness. Right on time. Caleb couldn't keep the pride from his voice. Ready to learn? Yes, sir. Darren straightened his shoulders, and for a moment, Caleb saw the man this boy could become. From her office window, Janelle watched the pair walk toward the maintenance bay, Caleb's hand on Darren's back, gesturing as he explained something. She saw how Darren hung on every word, how his stance gradually relaxed as Caleb showed him around the machinery. The scene brought unexpected tears to her eyes. This was more than just fixing machines or reopening a mill. This was about fixing broken trust, rebuilding shattered confidence. She watched as Caleb demonstrated proper safety protocols, patient and steady, the same way he'd calmed the crowd during the protest. Darren's face lit up as he recognized a particular piece of equipment, and he eagerly showed Caleb what he already knew. Caleb's answering smile was warm, genuine. The smile of a man who knew that sometimes the strongest repairs started with the smallest pieces. The mill's overhead lights hummed faintly as Caleb sat alone at the desk in the small security office. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. Stacks of invoices, maintenance logs, and security reports covered the worn wooden surface. The clock on the wall showed 11:43 p.m. He rubbed his tired eyes and reached for another folder. As head of security, he had access to most of the mill's paperwork, but something didn't add up. The numbers weren't matching what they should be. Lord, give me clarity, he muttered, pulling out his reading glasses. The maintenance request caught his attention first. 3 separate work orders for the same broken window, each paid to different contractors. He frowned, making a note in his small notebook. The date matched the protest when that brick came through. 1 broken window, 3 payments, he said quietly to himself. That's not right. His fingers traced down columns of numbers, stopping at unusual entries. Safety equipment ordered but never delivered, inspection fees that seemed too high, small discrepancies that added up to something bigger. Caleb pulled open his laptop and cross-referenced the contractor names. Most were local companies he knew, but a few were unfamiliar. He typed one into the search bar: Highland Industrial Solutions. The results showed a company less than 6 months old, with an address that led to an empty storefront in the next county. The sound of the heating system kicking on made him jump. He'd been so focused he'd forgotten where he was. The empty mill creaked and settled around him, its shadows deeper in the late hour. More digging revealed a pattern. Every time Janelle announced a new initiative, mysterious expenses appeared. The Second Chance apprenticeship program had barely started when 3 separate consulting fees showed up, paid to companies he couldn't verify. His military training kicked in. This wasn't random, this was coordinated. Someone with access to the books was bleeding the mill dry, making each project cost more than it should, making Janelle look bad. The next folder held purchase orders. Caleb's jaw tightened as he noticed the signatures. Most bore Janelle's familiar script, but others. He held one up to the light. The signature looked right at first glance, but the strokes were too perfect, too practiced. Forgeries, he whispered. Clean ones too. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava. Dad, it's late. You okay? He typed back quickly. All good, sweetheart. Just working. Say your prayers and sleep tight. Turning back to the desk, Caleb opened his notebook again. He'd need proof before he could take this to Janelle. Real proof, not just hunches. Someone powerful was trying to sabotage her efforts. Someone who knew how to hide their tracks in paperwork and policy. The board meeting minutes showed who had access to approve these expenses. Most names he recognized as local business leaders, but one stood out, Victor Hale. He'd joined the board recently, representing an investment group interested in distressed properties. Caleb's instincts prickled. He'd seen this before, create problems, then swoop in to save things by buying cheap. The thought of someone doing that to Janelle, using racism and fear to drive her out, made his blood boil. More searching revealed connections. The fake companies all traced back to shell corporations, and those led to investment firms. He couldn't prove it yet, but the path seemed to point toward Hale's group. The clock struck midnight as Caleb carefully sorted the papers back into their proper places. He couldn't risk anyone knowing he'd seen these records. Not yet. First, he needed to protect Janelle by building an airtight case. His boots echoed in the empty hallway as he made his final security walk. The mill's huge windows reflected the moonlight, creating patterns on the floor. He thought about Janelle's vision for this place, not just jobs, but hope. Second chances. Community. At his truck, Caleb paused to scan the parking lot one last time. A flicker of movement caught his eye near the loading dock. There and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. But his combat-trained senses told him someone was watching. He climbed into his truck, mind heavy with what he discovered. The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the darkness. As he pulled away, a figure stood in deep shadow behind the mill's corner, unseen, watching his departure. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Mary's Corner Diner, catching dust motes in golden beams. The familiar scent of coffee and bacon filled the air as the breakfast crowd settled into their usual routines. Janelle Whitaker sat alone in a corner booth, her tablet propped against a napkin holder as she reviewed the day's schedule. She'd chosen the diner deliberately, a gesture of presence in the community. But now, picking at her untouched wheat toast, she couldn't ignore the sideways glances and hushed conversations floating around her. Heard their cutting corners on safety checks. A gravelly voice carried from 2 booths over. Bringing in outside workers. Mark my words, another whispered. Janelle kept her eyes on her screen, but her shoulders tensed. She'd faced prejudice before, but this felt different, more personal, more coordinated. The whispers had started just days after she'd discovered the threatening note on her car. The bell above the diner's door chimed. An unfamiliar man in a worn denim jacket entered, carrying a stack of papers. He began moving from table to table, speaking in low tones and leaving flyers behind. Janelle couldn't see the contents, but the reactions told her enough raised eyebrows, furtive glances in her direction, paper quickly tucked into pockets or purses. Mary, the diner's owner, approached Janelle's table with a fresh pot of coffee. Her weathered face carried an apologetic look. "Don't you worry about them gossips," she murmured, topping off Janelle's cup. "Some folks just fear what they don't understand." "Thank you, Mary." Janelle managed a small smile, warming her hands around the fresh coffee. The diner's door chimed again. Caleb Reed stepped in, scanning the room with the subtle alertness she'd come to recognize. His gaze found her first, then shifted to the man with the flyers. Something in his expression hardened. He moved through the diner with purpose, intercepting the man near the counter. "Mind if I see one of those?" His voice carried just enough edge to draw attention. The man hesitated, then handed over a flyer. Janelle watched Caleb's jaw tighten as he read. Even from across the room, She could see the crude cartoon depicting her as a caricature, surrounded by dollar signs and warnings about outside agendas, threatening our way of life. Who authorized this? Caleb's quiet question cut through the diner's morning chatter. The man shrugged, already backing toward the door. Just sharing information, friend. People have a right to know. Information or intimidation? Caleb took a step forward, but the man was already slipping out, leaving the stack of remaining flyers on the counter. Caleb gathered them up, his movements controlled but angry. He crossed to Janelle's booth, sliding in across from her. Without a word, he placed one flyer face down on the table between them. You don't need to see these, he said softly. I do, actually. Janelle reached for the paper, her hand steady despite the churning in her stomach. She'd seen worse, she told herself. But when she turned it over, the crude hatred still stung. I've got some calls to make, Caleb said, pulling out his phone. We'll find who's behind this. Will it matter? Janelle's voice was quiet, but carried a weight of exhaustion. This isn't just about flyers, Caleb. It's about fear. Fear of change. Fear of difference. She gestured around the diner where conversations had dropped to whispers again. Caleb set his phone down, really looking at her. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, the lines around his eyes that spoke of battles fought and wisdom earned. You're right, he said. Fear's the real enemy here. But I've seen fear lose its grip before. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she felt the steadiness of his presence. Truth takes time, but it shines. My commanding officer used to say that. Meant that lies need shadows to survive, but truth just needs patience and light. Janelle felt something in her chest loosen, just a little. She looked around the diner again, but this time she noticed different details. Mary firmly telling a gossiper to hush, an elderly man ripping up a flyer with disgust, a young waitress offering her an encouraging smile. Patience and light, she repeated softly, squaring her shoulders. The weight was still there, the hurt of prejudice and the burden of proving herself yet again. But something else was there too, a quiet determination, a flame of hope that refused to flicker out. We've got work to do, she said, reaching for her tablet. The day's schedule still waited, full of meetings and decisions that could help heal this town. She might be weary, but she wasn't alone, and she wasn't finished. Caleb nodded, understanding in his eyes. He pulled out his own notebook, and together they began planning their next steps. While outside the diner windows, the morning sun continued its slow, steady climb into the sky. A young mother at a nearby table caught Janelle's eye and gave her a small wave, quickly followed by her child's bright smile. In that simple gesture, Janelle found another spark of hope to hold on to. The path ahead might be difficult, but there was light to be found, if you knew where to look. The morning sun filtered through the mill's high windows, casting long shadows across the newly cleaned machinery. Workers moved with purpose, their boots echoing on the concrete floor as they went about their tasks. The hum of productivity filled the air until 3 figures in dark suits appeared at the main entrance, badges glinting. OSHA inspection, announced the lead inspector, a stern-faced woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. We've received complaints about unsafe working conditions. The workers froze. Someone dropped a wrench, the clang reverberating through the suddenly silent space. Whispers rippled across the floor like a wave. Eli Turner emerged from between 2 textile machines, his weathered face creased with anger. I knew it, he growled, loud enough for everyone to hear. Fancy promises, but same old story, cutting corners to save a buck. More workers gathered, their faces a mix of fear and uncertainty. Some began shutting down their stations, hands trembling. A young woman near the spinning frames started to cry quietly. Caleb Reed strode through the double doors, his calm presence drawing all eyes. Ma'am, he addressed the lead inspector professionally. I'm Caleb Reed, head of security. Let me escort you to our safety office. We'll need to see all current inspection logs, maintenance records, and employee training documentation, the inspector said, pulling out a tablet. Her 2 colleagues began photographing the machinery. Right this way. Caleb's voice remained steady, but his jaw tightened. He caught sight of Darren hovering nervously by his workstation. Darren, please inform Miss Whitaker we have visitors. Eli stepped forward, arms crossed. About time someone looked into this place. You can't trust... Mr. Turner, Caleb cut in firmly. Why don't you join us? As our most experienced worker, your input would be valuable." In the safety office, Caleb pulled out binder after binder of meticulously maintained records. His military precision showed in the organized tabs and clearly labeled sections. The inspector raised an eyebrow, seemingly surprised by the thoroughness. Janelle arrived, her heels clicking purposefully on the concrete. If the surprise inspection rattled her, it didn't show in her professional demeanor. "Good morning. I'm Janelle Whitaker, CEO. We welcome your inspection and will provide full access to our facilities and records." For the next 3 hours, the inspectors combed through every inch of the mill. They tested emergency stops, checked guardrails, and interviewed workers. Eli hovered nearby, pointing out potential issues, but each concern had already been addressed in Caleb's documentation. The tension grew as workers whispered in clusters. Production ground to a halt. Every minute of shutdown meant lost revenue the struggling mill couldn't afford. "Ms. Whitaker?" one inspector called out, frowning at an electrical panel. "This wiring appears non-standard." Before Janelle could respond, Caleb produced a folder. "Recent upgrade documentation, ma'am. Certified by the state electrical inspector last month. You'll find the permits and inspection reports here." The lead inspector studied the papers, then nodded slowly. "Very thorough, Mr. Reed." By early afternoon, shadows lengthened across the empty mill floor. The inspection team huddled near the entrance, comparing notes on their tablets. Workers watched anxiously from their stations, afraid to move. Finally, the lead inspector approached Janelle and Caleb. "We found no major safety violations. There are a few minor recommendations we'll include in our report." A collective exhale seemed to sweep through the building. Someone in the back actually cheered. "But overall, your safety protocols exceed minimum requirements. Well done, Ms. Whitaker." Janelle shook their hands graciously. "Thank you for your diligence. We'll address those recommendations immediately." After the inspectors left, workers slowly returned to their tasks. Eli stood alone by a window, his expression unreadable. Caleb approached him quietly. "Those records," Eli said gruffly, "they're real? Not just paper pushing?" "Every safety measure documented is in place," Caleb replied. "Ms. Whitaker insisted on exceeding standards, not just meeting them." Eli nodded slowly, then walked away without another word. But his shoulders had lost some of their angry tension. The rest of the day crawled by. Workers whispered about lost wages from the shutdown. The machines, usually humming with life, stood silent more often than not as people struggled to refocus. In her office, Janelle sat behind her desk, head buried in her hands. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the blinds, striping her desk with bars of light and dark. She didn't look up at the soft knock on her door. "Come in," she said, her voice tired. Caleb entered, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He set one beside her, the rich aroma filling the air. 3 sugars, splash of cream," he said quietly. Janelle lifted her head, offering a weak smile. "You remembered." "Hard day," Caleb said, settling into the chair across from her desk. It wasn't a question. 6 hours of lost production, Janelle sighed. "We were already behind schedule. The board won't be happy." "The workers are still here," Caleb pointed out, "still believing in what we're doing. Even Eli seemed impressed by our safety standards." "Thanks to your documentation," Janelle said. "I don't know what we would have done without your attention to detail." "Just doing my job." Caleb sipped his coffee. "You know, back in the service we had a saying, 'Pressure makes diamonds.' Today proved we're doing things right, even if it cost us some time." Janelle wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, drawing strength from its solidity. "When I saw those inspectors walk in, I thought—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "But we proved them wrong," Caleb said firmly. "With facts, with documentation, with real safety measures. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee as the late afternoon sun painted the office in warm hues. Outside, the sound of machinery gradually picked up as workers found their rhythm again. The sun hung low in the sky, painting Eden's Ford in soft oranges and pinks. After the tense OSHA inspection, Caleb knew they all needed a break. He watched as Ava skipped ahead on the wooden planks of the Riverwalk, her sneakers thumping against the boards in an energetic rhythm. "Look, the fireflies are starting," Ava called out, pointing to the first flickering lights appearing near the riverbank. Janelle walked beside Caleb, her heels replaced with comfortable flats. She'd loosened her usual professional demeanor, letting her shoulders relax for what felt like the first time in days. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the gentle sound of moving water below. "Your daughter has such joy," Janelle said softly. "It reminds me of simpler times," Caleb nodded, watching Ava try to catch fireflies in her cupped hands. "She keeps me going on the hard days, makes me remember what matters." They reached a wooden bench overlooking the water. Ava was still within sight but absorbed in her firefly hunt, giving them a moment of privacy. As they sat down, Janelle's professional mask slipped further. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm in over my head here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After my divorce, I threw myself into work. Thought if I could just prove myself." She trailed off, watching the water flow past. Caleb turned slightly toward her. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Janelle's fingers twisted in her lap. "He said I was too focused on my career, too ambitious. Maybe he was right. The marriage fell apart, and I felt like such a failure." She gave a sad laugh. "Now here I am, trying to save this mill, and some days I'm terrified I'll fail these people too." "You're not failing," Caleb said firmly. His hand moved as if to touch hers, then settled back on the bench between them. "You're fighting for something that matters. That takes courage." The fireflies were out in full force now, their lights dancing over the dark water. Ava's delighted giggles floated back to them as she chased the glowing insects. "What about you?" Janelle asked gently. "Ava mentioned you sing hymns at night sometimes." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "PTSD, he finally said, "from my time in service. Some nights the memories come back strong. The hymns, they help quiet my mind." He looked down at his hands. "Being a single dad, trying to be enough for Ava while dealing with all that, gets lonely sometimes." "I can imagine," Janelle said softly. Her hand found his on the bench, giving it a gentle squeeze. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies and listening to the river's steady flow. The evening air grew cooler, and Janelle unconsciously moved closer to Caleb's warmth. When she turned to say something, their faces were suddenly very close. Caleb's eyes dropped to her lips, and Janelle felt her breath catch. The moment stretched like honey, sweet and slow. "So, are you two dating yet?" Ava's voice broke through the tension like a bell. They jumped apart, both turning to find Ava standing there with her hands on her hips and a mischievous grin on her face. Caleb cleared his throat. "Ava Reed," but Janelle burst out laughing, the sound rich and genuine. After a moment, Caleb joined in, and even Ava giggled at their reaction. "Come on," Caleb said, standing and offering his hand to help Janelle up. "We should head back before it gets too dark." They walked home together, Ava bouncing between them and chattering about the fireflies she'd caught and released. The weight of the day's inspection and their deeper conversation felt lighter somehow, carried away by shared laughter and understanding. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mill's weathered brick facade as workers gathered for the reopening ceremony. Paper streamers in red and gold, the colors of new beginnings, fluttered from the wrought iron gates. The church choir, dressed in their Sunday best, stood in neat rows near the entrance, their hymn books clutched in eager hands. Janelle stood at the podium, her burgundy blazer adding warmth to her professional demeanor. Her fingers traced the edge of her father's worn Bible, which lay closed beside the microphone. The crowd before her was a sea of familiar faces, some still cautious, others beaming with hope. "Good morning, Edensford," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Today isn't just about reopening a building. It's about reopening our hearts to possibility." Caleb watched from the side, pride swelling in his chest. He'd spent the early hours doing final security checks, making sure every corner of the mill was ready. Now, seeing Janelle address their community with such grace, he couldn't help but smile. The choir director raised her hands, and the first notes of "Great is Thy Faithfulness" rose into the crisp morning air. The melody wrapped around them like a warm embrace, carrying memories of countless Sundays and shared struggles. Several older workers dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. When the song ended, Janelle pressed a large button on the podium. The mill's ancient whistle sounded 3 long, clear notes that echoed across town. Inside, machines hummed to life, their steady rhythm promising work and dignity restored. Mrs. Pike, Darren's mother, stood near the front, tears streaming freely down her face. Her son, dressed in clean work clothes with his apprentice badge gleaming, stepped forward to help guide the first tour group inside. The pride in her eyes spoke volumes about second chances, and Mother's prayers answered. "Mom, stop crying," Darren mumbled, but his own voice was thick with emotion as he hugged her quickly. Ava, wearing her favorite yellow dress for the occasion, tugged at Caleb's sleeve. "Dad, look! The machines are dancing!" She pointed to the gentle sway of the looms visible through the windows, now threading their first pattern since the shutdown. Not everyone shared the jubilant mood. Near the back of the crowd, a few former skeptics crossed their arms, their whispers carrying hints of doubt. "Let's see how long it lasts," one muttered. "Fancy ceremony don't guarantee success." But their words couldn't dim the light of this moment. Workers filed in for their shifts, touching the doorframe like a blessing as they passed. Marisol stood by the entrance, handing out fresh coffee and pastries, her smile as warm as the morning sun. Inside, the transformed factory floor gleamed. New safety rails shone alongside restored vintage equipment, blending respect for tradition with modern standards. The air hummed with possibility and the sweet scent of machine oil and hope. Janelle made her way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting cautious congratulations. When she reached Caleb, their eyes met in a moment of shared triumph. All those late nights planning, the careful negotiations, the patient bridge building, it had led to this. "We did it," she said softly, her professional mask slipping just enough to show her joy. "You did it," Caleb corrected, his voice gentle. "I just kept the peace while you worked your magic." Ava, ever observant, looked between them with a knowing smile. "You both did it," she declared. "Like a team." The morning stretched into afternoon as workers settled into their stations, muscle memory returning as they handled familiar tasks. The quality control team approved the first batch of textile samples, earning a round of applause that echoed through the building. As the sun began to set, Caleb drove home with Ava, both tired but content. She chattered about everything she'd seen, the massive looms, the colorful threads, the way Janelle had remembered everyone's names. Later that night, as Caleb tucked Ava into bed, she yawned and snuggled into her pillow. Her room was bathed in the soft glow of her butterfly nightlight, casting gentle shadows on the walls. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart?" "She makes you smile again." Ava's words were simple but carried the weight of years of watching her father's quiet grief. "Like you used to." Caleb's breath caught in his throat. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead, taking a moment to find his voice. In the quiet of his daughter's room, he couldn't deny the truth of her observation. Something had changed, not just in the town, but in his heart. He sat there in the soft darkness, listening to Ava's breathing even out into sleep, and finally allowed himself to acknowledge what she'd seen so clearly. It was true. Janelle had brought something back to life in him, just as surely as she'd brought life back to the mill. The morning after the successful soft opening dawned gray and humid. Workers filed into the mill, their boots clicking against the concrete floor as machines hummed to life. The sweet scent of fresh coffee wafted from the break room where Darren was explaining the new safety protocols to a group of apprentices. Caleb stood in his office, reviewing maintenance logs when the first screech of metal pierced the air. The sound hit him like a physical blow, triggering memories of combat zones. His training kicked in instantly. "Everyone clear the floor!" His voice carried across the facility as he sprinted toward the commotion. The spinning assembly line had gone haywire. Metal components flew in dangerous arcs, while Jim Martinez, one of the senior operators, lay crumpled beside his station. Blood seeped through his shirt sleeve. "Call an ambulance," Caleb shouted, rushing to Jim's side. He pressed his handkerchief against the wound, speaking softly to keep the injured man calm. "Stay with me, Jim. Help's coming." Janelle burst through the double doors, her heels echoing against the concrete. Her face paled at the sight of the blood, but she maintained her composure. "What happened?" "Machine malfunction," Caleb explained, his voice tight. "The safety wire should have prevented this." The paramedics arrived within minutes, efficiently transferring Jim onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, Marisol appeared with a tablet displaying security footage. Her hands trembled slightly. "Ms. Whitaker, you need to see this." The grainy video showed someone in a maintenance uniform examining the machine late last night. The figure methodically accessed the control panel, worked for several minutes, then disappeared into the shadows. "Freeze that frame," Janelle commanded. The timestamp read 11:40, 2 p.m. Eli Turner stepped forward, his weathered face grave. Only someone with security clearance could access the building that late. His eyes fixed on Caleb. Someone who signed off on the safety checks. A heavy silence fell over the gathered workers. Caleb felt their stares like physical weight on his shoulders. There must be some mistake, Darren spoke up from the crowd. Mr. Reed wouldn't. Show me the inspection logs, Janelle cut in, her voice professional but strained. Caleb handed over his tablet, watching as she scrolled through the documents. His signature appeared at the bottom of each safety report. The final inspection had been logged at 10:30 p.m., just an hour before the tampering. The badges, Marisol said quietly. Check the badge access records. Janelle's fingers flew across the screen. Her sharp intake of breath told Caleb everything before she spoke. Your badge was used to enter at 11:40 p.m. I was home with Ava, Caleb protested, but the words sounded hollow even to his ears. Someone must have cloned my credentials, or someone's trying to protect the CEO's reputation, Eli muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd. Janelle straightened her spine. CEO mask firmly in place. Mr. Reed, please come to my office. Her tone was formal, distant, so different from their shared laughter by the river just days ago. The walk to her office felt endless. Through the glass walls, Caleb could see Ava waiting in the reception area. She must have heard about the accident and come straight from school. Her young face was pinched with worry. Inside the office, Janelle closed the door and sank into her chair. For a moment, her professional facade cracked, showing the pain underneath. Someone's trying to destroy everything we've built. Janelle, you know I would never. What I know, she interrupted, is that a man is injured. The evidence points to tampering, and your signature is on every safety document. She pressed her fingers to her temples. The board is already calling for action. Caleb understood then what had to happen. You need to suspend me, Caleb. Her voice softened, and somehow that hurt worse than anger would have. It's the right call, he said firmly. The mill has to come first. These people need their jobs. Janelle stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Consider yourself suspended pending investigation. Please, surrender your badge and keys. Caleb removed his credentials, placing them carefully on her desk. Their fingers didn't touch during the exchange. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever happens, protect the mill. These people need something to believe in. In the reception area, Ava stood as he approached. She didn't ask questions. She'd always been too perceptive for her age. She simply slipped her small hand into his as they walked toward the exit. Through the glass doors, Caleb caught one last glimpse of Janelle. She stood at her office window, arms wrapped around herself, watching them leave. The distance between them felt vast and growing wider with each step. Ava's hand tightened in his as they stepped into the gray morning light. The mill's machines continued their steady rhythm behind them, the sound fading as father and daughter walked silently away. Thunder rumbled outside as Caleb hunched over his workbench in the garage, trying to focus on fixing Mrs. Henderson's broken toaster. The steady drum of rain on the metal roof usually soothed him, but tonight each drop felt like an accusation. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he gripped the screwdriver. A flash of lightning illuminated the cramped space, and suddenly he wasn't in his garage anymore. He was back overseas, the smell of smoke thick in his nostrils, the sound of gunfire replacing thunder. His breath caught in his throat. Breathe, soldier, he whispered to himself, gripping the edge of the workbench until his knuckles turned white. Just breathe. The toaster clattered to the concrete floor, the sound making him flinch. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. The walls seemed to close in as memories he'd fought so hard to keep buried came rushing back. The explosion, the screams, the weight of responsibility for lives lost under his command. Daddy. Ava's soft voice cut through the fog of his flashback. She stood in the doorway wearing her favorite purple pajamas, concern etched on her young face. Are you okay? Caleb forced himself to take a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just dropped something. You should be in bed. But Ava knew better. She'd seen these moments before, though they'd grown rarer over the years. Without a word, she padded across the concrete floor in her sock feet and took his large, calloused hand in her small one. Let's pray, she said simply. the way she always did when she found him like this. God, please be Dad's peace tonight. He's hurting, and you're good at fixing hurts. Wrap him up in your love like a big warm blanket. Amen. The simple, childlike faith in her voice brought tears to Caleb's eyes. He squeezed her hand gently, anchoring himself in the present moment. When did you get so wise, little one? Mom always said I was an old soul, Ava replied with a slight smile. And Miss Janelle says sometimes the smallest people have the biggest hearts. The mention of Janelle sent a fresh wave of pain through his chest. Ava noticed his expression change and hugged him tightly around the waist. She'll figure out the truth, Daddy. She's smart. Across town, in her office at the mill, Janelle sat alone in the pool of light from her desk lamp. Her computer screen glowed with cruel comments from the local community forum. Who does she think she is? Coming here and acting like she owns the place. Can't trust someone who'd throw a good man under the bus to save face. Never should have let an outsider take over. She scrolled past dozens more, each one a dagger to her confidence. The empty mill echoed with memories of that morning. The workers' cry of pain, the accusations in people's eyes, the hurt in Caleb's expression as she'd asked him to step down. Did I do the right thing? She whispered to the empty room. Her father's Bible sat on the corner of her desk, worn and familiar. She reached for it, finding comfort in its weathered leather cover. Opening to a random page, her eyes fell on Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Lord, she prayed softly, I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. Everyone's watching, waiting for me to fail. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Her gaze drifted to the photo on her desk of her parents standing proud in front of their small business. Her father's words echoed in her memory. Baby girl, doing right ain't always doing easy. In his garage, Caleb sat on an old wooden stool, Ava's head resting against his shoulder as the storm continued outside. His racing heart had finally slowed to its normal rhythm. Want to sing? Ava asked sleepily. Without waiting for an answer, she started softly. Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. Caleb's deep voice joined hers, the familiar hymn washing over them like a healing balm. That saved a wretch like me. Meanwhile, Janelle wiped her eyes and began to pray again, this time with more strength in her voice. Lord, I need your wisdom. Show me the path forward. Help me see what I'm missing. The rain continued its steady rhythm, a natural symphony connecting their separate prayers. In his garage, Caleb whispered, God, give me strength to trust your timing. In her office, Janelle murmured, Father, help me find your truth. Neither knew the other was praying at that exact moment, their hearts reaching toward the same heaven, seeking the same guidance. The storm raged on outside, but in their separate sanctuaries, both found a measure of peace in the simple act of surrender. Ava had fallen asleep against her father's shoulder, her face peaceful in the dim light. Caleb carefully lifted her, carrying her back into the house. As he tucked her into bed, she stirred slightly. Don't worry, Daddy, she mumbled, already half asleep. God's got this. He kissed her forehead gently. When did you get so smart? Miss Janelle says wisdom comes in all sizes, Ava replied with a sleepy smile before drifting off completely. In her office, Janelle finally closed her Bible and stood up, gathering her things to head home. The rain had settled into a gentle drizzle, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the late hour. She paused at her office door, looking out over the darkened mill floor. Lord, she whispered one final time, whatever happens, let your truth prevail. The night wrapped around both of them. Caleb in his quiet house, Janelle in her empty mill, each seeking solace in prayer, each unknowingly connected by their shared faith and the lingering echo of Amazing Grace in the rain-soaked darkness. Early morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of Eden's Ford Community Church, casting colorful shadows across the worn wooden pews. Marisol Alvarez stood near the altar, arranging fresh flowers with practiced care when she spotted Caleb Reed slipping quietly through the side door. His shoulders were slumped, his usual military posture giving way to the weight of recent events. Caleb, Marisol called softly, setting down her flowers. I've been praying you'd come by. He paused, managing a tired smile. Morning, Marisol. Just came to drop off some repaired hymnals. Marisol glanced around the empty church before walking over to him. Her sensible shoes clicked against the floor as she approached. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Hi-Jo. I heard something last night that you need to know." Caleb's expression sharpened, his security training kicking in despite his exhaustion. "What is it?" "After Bible study, I was cleaning up in the fellowship hall." Marisol's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 2 men came in, thinking the place was empty. One of them, that new contractor, Mike Wheeler, was laughing about making things look unsafe at the mill. She crossed herself. "He said the money was good for such easy work." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Did they say anything else?" Wheeler mentioned a meeting at the Riverside Diner. Something about getting final payment. Marisol's dark eyes were troubled. "Caleb, this wasn't just careless talk. They were bragging about hurting people on purpose." The pieces started falling into place in Caleb's mind. Wheeler was one of Victor Hale's recommended contractors, brought in right before the accident. The same Victor Hale who'd been suspiciously quiet during all the recent troubles. "Thank you, Marisol." Caleb squeezed her shoulder gently. "I need to go see Janelle. She's hurting too, you know." Marisol touched his arm. "Sometimes pride and fear make us push away the very people we need most." Caleb nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. He walked out into the morning sunshine, his mind racing. Getting to Janelle wouldn't be easy, not after the suspension and the ugly rumors Victor had spread about them. But he had to try. 20 minutes later, he stood in the mill's parking lot watching Janelle's car pull in. She got out, elegant as always in her business suit, but he could see the strain around her eyes. When she spotted him, she froze. "Ms. Whitaker," he called formally, keeping his distance. "I need 5 minutes of your time. It's about mill safety." She glanced toward the building, where early shift workers were arriving. "Mr. Reed, you know you're not supposed to be here during your suspension. Please." He met her gaze steadily. "What I have to say could protect people from getting hurt." Something in his voice must have reached her. After a long moment, she nodded. "My office. 5 minutes." They walked in silence through the mill's corridors. Workers looked away awkwardly, the tension thick enough to cut. Inside her office, Janelle closed the door and turned to face him, her professional mask firmly in place. Marisol overheard Wheeler bragging about sabotage, Caleb said without preamble. "He's meeting someone about payment at the Riverside Diner." Janelle's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. The timing of his hire, the accidents, the rumors, it all points to Victor Hale. Caleb continued. "He wants the mill to fail so he can buy it cheap. I've seen his type before in the service, men who think money justifies hurting others." "That's a serious accusation," Janelle said carefully. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet, but we could get it." Caleb took a careful step forward. "Janelle, I know trusting me right now is hard. But these people, they're willing to hurt innocent workers to get what they want. We can't let that happen." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The wall clock ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Let's find proof." Caleb nodded, relief and determination flooding through him. They had a chance to make things right, not just for themselves, but for everyone counting on the mill's success. The next morning dawned gray and misty as Caleb sat at his kitchen table, spreading documents across the scratched wooden surface. His coffee had long gone cold, forgotten, as he pieced together a puzzle of deceit. Bank statements, work orders, and safety inspection reports created a disturbing pattern. His phone buzzed. A text from Janelle. "Meeting Eli at the diner. Join us?" 20 minutes later, they huddled in a corner booth at May's Diner. Eli Turner's weathered face was creased with concentration as he studied a contractor's invoice. "Look here," Eli muttered, jabbing his finger at a line item. "These parts weren't just overpriced, they're phantom charges. I ran the union warehouse for 30 years. Nobody pays this much for basic safety switches." Janelle leaned forward, her professional facade cracking to reveal genuine concern. "Could you get statements from your old suppliers to verify the standard costs?" "Already on it." Eli's gruff voice held unexpected warmth. "Called in some favors this morning. Should have the paperwork by noon." Marisol arrived with a manila envelope, sliding into the booth beside Eli. Her usual gentle expression was stern. "The cleaning crew found these in the dumpster behind Victor's office." She pulled out crumpled payment authorizations. Caleb studied the documents, his military training kicking in as he organized the evidence. These signatures don't match the ones on file. Someone's been forging approvals. They worked through lunch, connecting dots between shell companies and suspicious bank transfers. Marisol's church secretary skills proved invaluable as she created detailed spreadsheets on her laptop. By late afternoon, they relocated to Janelle's small home office for privacy. Ava was at a friend's house, giving them space to work. Empty coffee cups littered the desk as they built their case. "Here's the smoking gun," Caleb said, placing two documents side by side. The original safety inspection from last month and the altered version submitted to OSHA. Someone digitally modified the dates and findings. Janelle's fingers traced the differences. The question is, how do we prove Victor's behind it? Maybe this helps. Eli pulled out his phone, showing them an email. "My buddy at the supplier warehouse found payments from a company called Horizon Holdings. Did some digging. It's registered to Victor's brother-in-law." That evening, Caleb drove home through Eden Ford's quiet streets, his truck's headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. In his rearview mirror, he noticed a dark sedan following at a distance. It stayed with him through 3 turns. His combat instincts kicked in. Instead of heading home, he drove to the well-lit grocery store parking lot. The sedan cruised past, but Caleb caught a glimpse of the driver, one of Victor's personal security guards. He waited 15 minutes before taking a different route home, hands tight on the steering wheel. This wasn't just about business anymore. Victor was getting desperate. The next morning, they gathered at the church office. Marisol had compiled everything into organized folders, while Eli brought statements from 3 different suppliers confirming the price manipulation. "Victor's been bleeding the mill dry," Janelle said quietly, reading through the evidence. "Setting it up to fail so he could buy it cheap. And he didn't care who got hurt in the process," Caleb added, thinking of the injured worker and Darren's shattered confidence. They worked through another day, building an airtight case. Bank records showed payments to local troublemakers who'd stirred up the protests. Emails revealed Victor's coordination with outside agitators. The altered safety logs painted a clear picture of sabotage. By sunset, they had 4 copies of everything. One for the board, one for legal authorities, one secured off-site, and one as backup. They weren't taking chances. Caleb and Janelle stood in her office as the others left, looking at the damning pile of evidence. The mill's machines hummed in the distance, a sound of hope they couldn't let die. "It's time to bring this into the light," Caleb said softly. Janelle reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Her eyes met his, showing the trust that had weathered their trials. They stood together, ready to fight for their mill, their town, and their second chances. The old church hall creaked under the weight of what seemed like half of Eden's Ford. Every wooden pew was packed, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the vestibule. The evening sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across worried faces. Janelle stood at the podium, her hands resting lightly on its worn edges. She wore a simple navy dress, no power suit today. This wasn't about authority, it was about truth. Her father's Bible sat beside her notes, a quiet reminder of strength. Whispers rustled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Some faces showed anger, others confusion, and a few, like Marisol in the front row, offered encouraging smiles. Caleb stood quietly to the side, a folder of documents in his hands, while Eli Turner sat near the front, his weathered face unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," Janelle began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Before I share what we've discovered, I want to say something from my heart." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces she'd come to know over these past months. "I forgive you," she said simply. The whispers stopped. "I forgive the harsh words, the suspicious looks, the painful assumptions. I understand them. When hope has been broken before, trust comes hard." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Peterson, who'd been particularly vocal against her, looked down at her hands. "But now you deserve to know the truth about what's been happening at our mill." Janelle gestured to Caleb, who stepped forward with quiet authority. 2 weeks ago, Caleb began, his deep voice carrying to the rafters, "we discovered evidence of deliberate sabotage." He opened the folder, laying out enlarged photographs and documents on a table beside the podium. These safety logs were altered. The accident that injured Tom wasn't random. Someone cut that wire deliberately. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Tom's wife, Sarah, sat up straighter, her eyes widening. "We followed the money," Caleb continued, pointing to bank statements. "Shell companies, paid protesters, False safety complaints, all leading back to one source. Board member Victor Hale. Eli Turner stood up then, his chair scraping against the floor. Folks know I'm no fan of corporate promises, he said gruffly. Been fighting them 40 years. But what Mr. Reed and Ms. Whitaker are saying is God's honest truth. I've seen the proof myself. The hall erupted in murmurs. Eli's word carried weight. He'd never sided with management before. Victor Hale wanted the mill to fail, Janelle explained, her voice gentle but firm. He planned to buy it cheap after forcing us to close. He didn't care about jobs, families, or this town's future. She held up a final document. This morning, the board voted to remove Mr. Hale. Legal authorities have been notified. But more importantly, she took a deep breath. The mill will stay open. With stronger safety protocols, fair wages, and an expanded apprenticeship program. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then from the back, a young voice called out, "Ms. Whitaker?" It was Darren, standing uncertainly in his work clothes. His mother touched his arm encouragingly. I want to apologize," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "for the protest, for doubting you, for letting everyone down." Janelle's eyes softened. "You haven't let anyone down, Darren. Your place in the apprenticeship program is still open if you want it." The first clap came from Marisol. Then Sarah, Tom's wife, joined in. Like a wave, applause spread through the hall, growing until it thundered off the walls. Some people were crying, others standing, and Mrs. Peterson was nodding vigorously, tears streaming down her face. Through it all, Janelle's eyes met Caleb's across the podium. In that moment of pure relief, something deeper passed between them. A shared victory, yes, but also something tender and unspoken, full of promise. The sound of hope had returned to Eden's Ford, and this time, it was built on truth. Eli made his way to the podium as the applause continued. "Well," he said gruffly, but with a hint of a smile, "reckon we got us a mill to run." He turned to Janelle and stuck out his calloused hand. "Welcome home, Miss Whitaker." The applause grew even louder. Darren's mother hugged him tight. Sarah wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. And in that old church hall, as evening light painted the windows in gold and purple, a community began to heal. The morning sun cast long shadows across Eden's Ford as news traveled like wildfire through the small town. Outside Jake's diner, clusters of people huddled over their coffee cups, discussing the shocking revelations about Victor Hale's schemes. "Did you hear?" Mrs. Peterson clutched her phone, showing her friend the local news website. The board voted unanimously to remove him last night. FBI's looking into his dealings too. Inside the mill's newly renovated break room, workers gathered around the television mounted on the wall. The local news anchor's voice filled the space. In a stunning development, prominent businessman Victor Hale faces multiple investigations following evidence of corporate sabotage. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching the workers' reactions. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others nodded with grim satisfaction. The past few days had been a whirlwind since the church hall meeting where everything came to light. Janelle appeared beside him, her presence warm and steady. "The justice system will handle Victor now," she said softly. "We need to focus on healing our community." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I just worry some folks might still have doubts. Trust is like a broken bone. Takes time to heal completely." They walked together through the mill floor, where machines hummed steadily. Workers nodded respectfully as they passed. Some even smiled, a marked change from the suspicious glares of weeks past. "Look around you." Janelle gestured to the activity. "These people chose truth over lies. They stood with us when it mattered most." A young worker approached them hesitantly. "Miss Whitaker? Mr. Reed?" It was Tommy from the maintenance crew. "Just wanted to say, well, we're sorry for doubting you both. Some of us said pretty harsh things." Caleb watched Janelle's face soften. "Water under the bridge, Tommy. We're moving forward together now." As they rounded the corner toward the offices, they spotted a familiar figure waiting nervously by Caleb's door. Darren Pike stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, looking younger than his 19 years. "Mr. Reed," he started, then faltered. "Caleb, I know I messed up. Both times. First with the protest, then quitting when things got tough." He swallowed hard. "But I was hoping, maybe." if there's still a spot in the apprenticeship program. Caleb stayed quiet, studying the boy he'd watched grow up. He remembered Darren as an angry 12-year-old, throwing rocks at windows. He remembered the glimpses of potential when they'd worked on cars together years ago. "Why should we trust you again?" Caleb's voice was firm but not unkind. Darren straightened his shoulders, meeting Caleb's eyes directly. "Because you taught me that a man owns his mistakes. I'm owning mine." And his voice grew stronger. "Because I want to make things right. Show everyone that second chances aren't wasted on me." Janelle watched the exchange silently, her eyes moving between them. "The work will be harder this time," Caleb warned. "No special treatment. You'll start at the bottom again." "Yes, sir. I understand. And you'll need to apologize to the other apprentices. Show them through actions, not just words, that you're serious." Darren nodded vigorously. "I will. I promise." Caleb let the moment stretch, then slowly extended his hand. "Proud of you, son." Darren's eyes widened at the words son. He grasped Caleb's hand firmly, pumping it up and down. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, Miss Whitaker. I won't let you down." Caleb caught Janelle wiping quickly at her eyes as Darren hurried away. "Got something in your eye?" he teased gently. "Must be mill dust," she replied with a watery smile. "You're good with him, you know. With all of them, really." "Just treating them the way my old sergeant treated me. Firm but fair. Everyone deserves a shot at redemption." Workers called out greetings as they continued their walk through the mill. The atmosphere had shifted noticeably, more relaxed, more hopeful. Where there had been tension and suspicion, now there was cautious optimism. Near the loading dock, they passed Eli deep in conversation with some younger workers, explaining the finer points of the textile machines. He paused to tip his hat to them. "Good morning, Miss Whitaker." Reed. "Never thought I'd see the day Eli would be teaching the new generation," Caleb mused as they walked on. "People can surprise you," Janelle replied. "Sometimes all they need is a chance to show their better nature." They stopped at the window overlooking the town. Morning light gilded the church steeple, and the trees were beginning to show their fall colors. Workers' cars filled the parking lot, a sight that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "You were right," Caleb admitted. "The community is stronger for having faced this together. Hate and lies couldn't stand against truth and forgiveness." Janelle's eyes misted again as she watched Darren cross the parking lot, tool belt already slung over his shoulder, heading toward the maintenance shop where his second chance waited. The morning air held the crisp promise of a fresh start as Caleb Reed walked across the mill's parking lot. His boots crunched on gravel, each step measured and purposeful. He'd pressed his khaki work shirt with extra care, the creases sharp as a soldier's uniform. The security badge clipped to his chest caught the early light. Inside, the familiar hum of machinery welcomed him. Workers glanced up from their stations, and a ripple of recognition spread through the production floor. Tom from maintenance waved first, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Well, look who's back where he belongs," Tom called out, setting down his toolbox. Sarah from the spinning room wiped her hands on her apron and hurried over. "About time, Mr. Reed. Place hasn't felt right without you watching over us." Caleb's throat tightened at their warmth. He'd spent sleepless nights wondering if the town's trust could ever be rebuilt. Now, watching faces light up with genuine welcome, something eased in his chest. "Good to be back," he managed, voice rough with emotion. Not everyone rushed to greet him, though. In the corner, a few workers kept their heads down, shoulders tense. Jerry, who'd worked the looms for 20 years, gave only a curt nod. Caleb understood. Trust, once shaken, took time to mend. The click of heels on concrete announced Janelle's arrival. She stood tall in a navy blazer, her presence commanding yet approachable. The morning shift gathered around as she raised her hand for attention. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice carrying across the floor. "As you can see, Mr. Reed has returned to us. But before we continue our day, I want to address something important." The machinery hummed in the background as workers drew closer. Caleb stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. Parade rest, an old habit. During the recent trouble, some questioned Mr. Reed's integrity. Those doubts were planted by people who wanted to divide us. Janelle's gaze swept the room. But Caleb Reed never wavered in his commitment to this mill and this community. When he discovered wrongdoing, he chose truth over self-protection. That's the kind of leadership we need. She turned to face Caleb directly. As CEO of Eden's Ford Textile Mill, I'm officially reinstating Caleb Reed as our head of safety and community partnerships. More than that, I'm proud to have him by my side as we rebuild trust in this community. A scattered applause began, growing stronger. Even Jerry joined in, his expression softening. Thank you, Ms. Whitaker, Caleb said simply. I promise to serve this mill and its people with everything I have. The crowd dispersed as shifts changed and work resumed. Throughout the day, Caleb moved through his routine with careful attention. He checked safety protocols, updated logs, and spoke with each worker personally. By late afternoon, the awkwardness had largely dissolved into the familiar rhythm of mill life. As sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Caleb sat on his front porch, listening to crickets begin their evening song. Ava was inside doing homework, and the neighborhood settled into peaceful quiet. His coffee had grown cold, forgotten as he watched the changing light. The soft crunch of footsteps made him look up. Janelle approached his porch, her professional attire exchanged for jeans and a soft sweater. She'd let her hair down, and the evening breeze played with loose curls. Mind if I join you? She asked. Caleb gestured to the empty rocking chair beside him. Please. She settled into the chair, its gentle creak mixing with cricket song. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky deepen to purple. Thank you, Caleb said finally, for what you said this morning, for believing in me, in men. That. End of sex. Janelle turned to face him, her eyes soft in the gathering dusk. You never gave me reason to doubt. Even when everything looked darkest, something in my heart knew you were trustworthy. It scared me, he admitted quietly. How much I wanted to protect you, protect the mill. Haven't felt that way since. Since your wife? He nodded, throat tight. Janelle's hand found his, warm and steady. I was scared too. After my divorce, I built walls, told myself I had to be strong alone. But watching you with Ava, with the workers, with Darren, I saw what real strength looks like. It's not about standing alone. It's about standing together. Their fingers interlaced naturally, like they'd been meant to find each other. The porch light clicked on automatically, casting a gentle glow around them. I can't promise it'll be easy, Caleb said. I'm still learning how to trust my heart again, still working through my own shadows. I don't need easy, Janelle replied. I just need honest. One day at a time. One honest day at a time, he echoed, squeezing her hand. I think I can manage that. They sat together as stars began to pepper the darkening sky, their joined hands a bridge between past and future, fear and hope, solitude and connection. Behind them, through the window, Ava pretended to study while secretly watching with a growing smile. The crickets sang on, a chorus of witnesses to this quiet moment of new beginnings. For the first time in years, both Caleb and Janelle felt the weight of loneliness lifting, replaced by the gentle certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together, one honest day at a time. Sunlight streamed through the mill's newly cleaned windows, catching dust motes that danced above the machinery. 3 weeks had passed since Caleb's reinstatement, and the production floor hummed with renewed energy. At the apprenticeship station, Ava Reed perched on a wooden stool, her ponytail bobbing as she helped a younger girl thread a bobbin. See? Just like making friendship bracelets, Ava explained, her patient tone mirroring her father's teaching style. Keep your fingers steady, and it'll work every time. Nearby, Darren Pike demonstrated proper machine maintenance to 2 teenage boys, his voice carrying with newfound confidence. Always check the tension here first, he said, pointing to a metal component. That's what Mr. Reed taught me, and it hasn't failed yet. Caleb watched from the doorway, pride warming his chest. Just months ago, these same machines had stood silent, gathering dust. Now, they represented hope and second chances. He felt Janelle's presence before he saw her, a familiar comfort that had grown between them. Your daughter's a natural teacher, Janelle said softly, stepping beside him. She wore her usual business attire, but her shoulders carried tension. The board meeting's in 30 minutes. Caleb nodded, noting the worry lines around her eyes. They're coming after the community programs again? Third quarter numbers are their excuse this time. Janelle's fingers brushed against his arm. Victor might be gone, but some board members still think profit margins matter more than people. Then we'll show them both can work together. Caleb's voice held the same steady assurance that had helped him through combat zones. "I've got the safety records and productivity stats ready." They walked toward the conference room, passing workers who nodded respectfully. Through the glass walls, they could see board members filing in, their suits sharp and expressions guarded. Before entering, Janelle paused. "Remember when you told me truth takes time but it shines?" she asked. "Still does." Caleb squeezed her hand briefly. "We've got facts and faith on our side." Inside, the air felt thick with skepticism. Board member Margaret Chen tapped her pen impatiently while Howard Brooks shuffled through financial reports. Caleb and Janelle took their seats side by side, a united front. "The apprenticeship program is costing us $40,000 per quarter," Brooks began without preamble. "That's money we could be using for equipment upgrades." Janelle opened her laptop calmly. "Actually, let me show you something interesting." She projected a graph onto the wall. "Since implementing the program, our maintenance costs have dropped 30%. These kids spot problems early because they're learning the machines from the ground up." "And safety incidents?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. Caleb stepped in. "Down 60%. When people feel invested in their work, they take better care. We're not just training workers, we're building a community that looks out for each other." "Sentiment doesn't pay shareholders," Brooks countered. "No, but this does." Janelle clicked to the next slide. "Overall efficiency is up 12%. Happy workers make better products. Our quality control rejections have hit an all-time low." The presentation continued, fact by fact, number by number. Caleb watched the board members' faces shift from skepticism to consideration. When Darren knocked and entered with the latest production reports, several members straightened with interest. "Sir," Darren addressed Caleb professionally, "we just completed the Thompson order 2 days ahead of schedule. Quality check came back perfect." "Thank you, Darren." Janelle smiled. "Would you mind telling the board about the maintenance protocol you developed?" For 10 minutes, Darren explained his system with growing confidence. The board members leaned forward, especially when he described how it had prevented a potential breakdown that could have cost thousands in repairs. After Darren left, the mood in the room had shifted. Margaret closed her portfolio slowly.
"Perhaps we've been looking at this program too narrowly,"
she admitted. "We're not just running a mill," Janelle said firmly. "We're rebuilding trust. That's an investment that pays dividends beyond any spreadsheet." Brooks sighed, but nodded. "Continue the program, but we'll review again next quarter." As the board members filed out, Caleb and Janelle remained seated, letting out long breaths. Through the window, they could see Ava leading her group in cleaning their workstation, her movements careful and proud. "You okay?" Caleb asked softly. "Better than okay." Janelle's smile held tired triumph. "But I could use some prayer about all this. My porch swing's got room for 2, he offered. After dinner, later that evening, crickets chirped in the darkness as they sat together on Caleb's porch. The swing creaked gently, a peaceful counterpoint to their quiet voices lifted in prayer. Janelle's hand found his as they asked for wisdom, for guidance, for strength, to keep building something good. Inside, Ava watched through the window, smiling at how natural they looked together, their heads bowed in shared faith. The porch light cast a warm glow around them, pushing back the darkness one prayer at a time. The late afternoon sun slanted through the church's stained glass windows, casting patches of amber and blue across the crowded fellowship hall. Paper plates clinked, and the aroma of home-cooked dishes filled the air as Eden's Ford's residents gathered for the celebration potluck. Children darted between tables decorated with cheerful yellow flowers, while the sounds of laughter and animated conversation created a warm symphony of community. Janelle Whitaker stood near the serving table, elegant in a navy dress that complemented her dark skin, helping Mrs. Peterson arrange her famous peach cobbler alongside other desserts. Her smile came easily now, a marked change from her first days in town. "Would you believe it's been 3 months since we reopened?" she asked, accepting a warm casserole from one of the mill workers. "Feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once," Mrs. Peterson replied, adjusting her glasses. Across the room, Caleb Reed was helping set up extra chairs, his sleeves rolled up as he worked. He traded his usual work clothes for a pressed button-down shirt, though he still moved with that familiar military precision. Ava flitted around him, carrying plastic utensils to each table with determined importance. The church's piano struck up a gentle melody as people began filling their plates. Marisol had outdone herself with trays of enchiladas, while Eli Turner's wife had brought enough fried chicken to feed half the county. The abundance spoke of a town coming back to life. "Miss Whitaker?" A hesitant voice drew Janelle's attention. It was Martha Simmons, one of the older spinners who'd initially opposed the reopening. "I wanted to say, well, we were wrong about you. About all of this." Janelle touched the woman's arm gently. "There's no need for that, Martha. Fear is natural when change comes." "But that's just it," Martha continued, wringing her hands slightly. "Some of us, we're still scared. What if something happens again? What if—" "Then we'll face it together." Caleb's steady voice joined the conversation. He'd approached quietly, carrying 2 loaded plates. "Here, ladies. Can't talk about the future on empty stomachs." Janelle accepted the plate with a grateful smile, noting how he'd remembered her preference for the green bean casserole. Other workers drifted over, drawn by the conversation. "Caleb's right," Janelle addressed the small group. "What makes us strong isn't the absence of problems. It's how we handle them together. Look around this room. 3 months ago, would you have believed we'd all be sharing a meal like this?" The workers exchanged glances, several shaking their heads. Tom Davis, a mechanic of 30 years, cleared his throat.
"Still, ma'am, running a mill these days, it ain't easy. Competition's fierce."
"Which is exactly why we need each other," Janelle replied firmly. "Every person in this room brings something valuable to our work. Your experience, Tom, that's worth more than any new machine. Martha's attention to detail, Sarah's leadership on second shift, even young Darren's fresh perspective in the apprentice program." Caleb stepped closer to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "I've seen a lot of operations in my time," he added, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "What we have here? It's special, not just because of the work we do, but because of how we do it together." Ava appeared suddenly, squeezing between them with a plate piled high with desserts. "Dad, Mrs. Peterson says they're about to start the singing. Can we sit up front?" The tension broke as people chuckled at her enthusiasm. Reverend Matthews was indeed gathering the choir near the piano, their familiar faces bright with anticipation. "Why don't we all move up?" Janelle suggested to the group. "I hear the acoustics are better there." As they settled into the front rows, the piano's opening notes filled the hall. The choir began the first verse of "Great is Thy Faithfulness," their harmonies rising clear and true. Ava swayed between Caleb and Janelle, her young voice joining the ancient words with unself-conscious joy. Janelle glanced at Caleb, catching his eye. In that moment, their shared look held volumes pride in their community, gratitude for second chances, and the quiet joy of standing together. His smile, warm and genuine, reflected everything in her heart. The music swelled around them, lifting toward the rafters. "Great is Thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with Thee." Martha Simmons wiped a tear from her cheek, while Tom Davis's weathered hand found his wife's. Even Eli, standing near the back, nodded in rhythm, his usual gruff expression softened by the moment. The late sun caught the dust motes dancing in the air, turning them to gold, as if blessing this gathering of people who had learned to trust again. Ava's voice rose clear above the others during the chorus, her face shining with simple joy as she looked up at her father and Janelle. They stood together, mill workers and management, old guard and new blood, all voices joining in celebration of something larger than themselves. In that moment, fear had no place among them. The future, whatever it might hold, would find them ready to face it as one. The familiar hymn continued, its promises washing over the assembled community like a gentle rain, healing old wounds and nurturing new growth. Each voice added to the tapestry of sound, unique yet harmonious, just as each person there brought their own gifts to their shared work. The autumn morning dawned crisp and clear over Eden's Ford. Early sunlight touched the polished brass letters of the new sign mounted on the renovated brick building adjacent to the mill. Veterans, Families Resource Center. Dozens of folding chairs filled the courtyard, facing a small podium decorated with red, white, and blue bunting. People trickled in steadily, mill workers in their Sunday best, veterans wearing their service caps, families with young children clutching small American flags. Marisol directed volunteers who arranged coffee, urns, and pastries on long tables at the back. The church choir assembled quietly to one side, their royal blue robes bright against the weathered brick wall. Caleb stood slightly apart from the growing crowd, adjusting his tie for the third time. His dress uniform still fit perfectly, but it felt strange after so many years. Ava reached up to straighten his medals, her eyes bright with pride. "Mom would love this, Dad," she whispered. His throat tightened. Sarah had always wanted to help other military families. She dreamed of creating a place where they could find support and understanding. Now here it was, but she wasn't here to see it. Janelle approached them, elegant in a navy dress. She squeezed Caleb's arm gently. "Everything's ready whenever you are." He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She understood without words, staying close as people began taking their seats. The familiar weight of his prepared speech felt heavy in his pocket. Elder veterans filled the front row, men and women who'd served in conflicts spanning decades. Darren helped an older man with a cane find his place, then sat with the other apprentices. Eli stood at the back, arms crossed but with obvious respect in his bearing. The clock tower chimed 10, and a respectful hush fell over the gathering. Caleb walked to the podium, his steps measured and steady despite the trembling in his hands. Janelle and Ava sat in the front row, their presence anchoring him. "Welcome," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "Today we dedicate more than just a building. We dedicate ourselves to supporting the men and women who've served our country, and the families who serve alongside them." He paused, looking out at the faces before him, faces that had become family over these past months. "This center is dedicated to the memory of Sarah Reed, my late wife. She understood that when one person serves, the whole family serves." His voice cracked slightly. Janelle's eyes met his, filled with gentle encouragement. Sarah knew that coming home isn't always easy, that sometimes the hardest battles are fought right here, long after the uniform comes off. She believed in second chances, in healing, in community. Just like this town has shown me, shown all of us, that healing happens when we stand together. The autumn breeze stirred the flags gently. In the distance, a train whistle echoed. The same sound that had once signaled shift, changes at the mill for generations. This center will offer counseling, job training, childcare, and most importantly, a place where military families can find understanding, where they can find hope. Caleb gestured to the building behind him. "Inside these walls, no one walks alone." Janelle rose and joined him at the podium. "The mill commits to providing employment opportunities for veterans and their spouses," she added. "We're stronger when we support each other. That's not just good business, it's good humanity." The choir director raised her hands, and the first notes of "Amazing Grace" rose pure and clear in the morning air. Caleb's eyes filled as the familiar melody washed over him. Memories of Sarah singing this hymn in their kitchen, dancing with Ava in her arms, flooded back with bittersweet clarity. Janelle's hand found his, warm and steady. Through his tears, he saw others wiping their eyes. The veteran in the front row, Darren's mother, even Eli. The music swelled, voices joining together in harmony that seemed to reach toward heaven itself. As the final notes faded, Caleb felt something shift inside him, like a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. The grief was still present, but somehow lighter, transformed into something that gave strength rather than took it away. He turned to Janelle, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can breathe again." Her fingers tightened around his as she smiled through her own tears. Together they watched the crowd rise, moving toward the center's open doors. Ava hugged them both, then ran to help Darren hand out programs for the tours. The autumn sunlight strengthened, warming the brick walls of this place built on hope and healing. Above them, the new sign gleamed like a promise kept, like a new chapter beginning. The late afternoon sun painted Eden's Ford in shades of amber and gold. After the emotional dedication ceremony, Caleb, Janelle, and Ava walked along the riverbank path. Their footsteps crunched softly on scattered autumn leaves as the water whispered beside them. Ava skipped ahead, her braids bouncing, pausing now and then to collect particularly vibrant maple leaves. "I'm going to press these in my science notebook," she called over her shoulder, darting further down the path. Caleb watched his daughter with a gentle smile, his hands in the pockets of his dress slacks. The day's ceremonies had left him drained but peaceful. Beside him, Janelle had traded her heels for comfortable flats, though she still wore her elegant navy dress from the dedication. "She's giving us space on purpose, you know," Janelle said softly, nodding toward Ava. "That girl's smarter than both of us put together. Don't I know it?" Caleb chuckled, then grew quiet. Sarah would have loved her at this age. So full of life, so aware of everything and everyone around her. Janelle's hand found his arm, squeezing gently. They stopped at a wooden bench overlooking a bend in the river. The setting sun transformed the water into liquid copper. "Today wasn't easy for you," Janelle said, sitting down. Talking about Sarah, dedicating the center in her memory. Caleb settled beside her, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "No, it wasn't. But it felt right. Like maybe all this pain finally has a purpose." He turned to look at her. "You gave me that gift, Janelle. You and this whole crazy journey with the mill. You gave me something too," she replied, watching the water flow. "When my marriage ended, I thought I was done with trust, done with letting anyone close enough to matter." She smoothed her dress over her knees. "I threw myself into work, told myself that was enough." "I know that feeling." Caleb's voice grew husky. "After Sarah died, I figured that chapter of my life was closed. Being Ava's dad, that was my whole world. Had to be enough." A cool breeze stirred the trees, sending more leaves spiraling down around them. Further ahead, Ava's laughter carried back as she chased a cluster of leaves dancing in the wind. "But it wasn't enough, was it?" Janelle turned to face him fully. "And that's what scares me, Caleb. Because now I want more. Now I look at you, at how you are with Ava, at how you stood by me through everything with the mill." She took a shaky breath. "And I'm terrified, because I can't imagine losing this. Losing you." Caleb's hand found hers, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "When Sarah died, I thought God was punishing me somehow. Kept thinking if I'd been home instead of deployed, maybe." He shook his head. "Took me years to understand that sometimes love just hurts because it's real, because it matters. And now?" Janelle's voice was barely above a whisper. "Now I'm scared too," he admitted. "Scared of failing you, of not being enough, scared of loving this much again." He looked down at their joined hands. "But I'm more scared of not telling you the truth." The sun touched the horizon, setting the sky ablaze with deep rose and gold. Ava's distant figure was silhouetted against the light as she wandered further ahead, giving them their moment. Caleb turned on the bench to face Janelle fully. His free hand came up to touch her cheek, and she leaned into his palm, her eyes glistening. "I love you, Janelle." His voice was steady now, certain. "Not just because you're strong, or brilliant, or because you saved this town. I love you because you pray with my daughter and sing off-key in your office when you think no one's listening. Because you forgave this town when they didn't deserve it. Because you make me want to be better, braver, more than I am." Tears spilled onto Janelle's cheeks, but she was smiling. "And I need you, Caleb Reed. Not just because you're protective, or capable, or because you kept me safe. I need you because you hum hymns when you're nervous and teach teenagers about second chances. Because you see me, really see me, and you're not afraid of my strength or my fears." She pressed her hand over his where it rested on her cheek. "Because you make me feel like coming home." The last rays of sunlight gilded their faces as Caleb leaned forward. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like a prayer, gentle, reverent, full of promise. When they parted, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Down the path, Ava's voice carried back to them on the evening breeze. "Does this mean you're finally going to ask Janelle to be my new mom?" They broke apart laughing, the sound echoing across the river as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of rose and purple. "Your daughter has excellent timing," Janelle said, wiping happy tears from her cheeks. "That she does," Caleb agreed, standing and offering Janelle his hand. "Come on, let's go catch up with our girl." Hand in hand, they walked toward Ava and the golden sunset, their shadows merging into one long silhouette across the leaf-scattered path. The autumn evening wrapped Eden's Ford in a gentle twilight. Porch lights flickered on one by one across town, like stars descending to earth. The old textile mill hummed steadily in the distance, its windows glowing with purpose and promise. Caleb Reed stood in his kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee while watching through the window as another group of apprentices left for the day. Young faces bright with accomplishment, tool belts slung over their shoulders. He smiled, remembering how it all started with Darren, now one of their best instructors. "Dad," Ava called from the front porch. "Miss Marisol's bringing over her famous peach cobbler." The screen door creaked as Janelle stepped inside, Her business suit traded for comfortable jeans and one of Caleb's old army sweatshirts. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "Successful day?" he asked, covering her hands with his. "Very. 2 more apprentices got certified today." She breathed in his familiar scent of coffee and cedar. "And the community center's running out of space for all the new programs." Caleb turned to face her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The months had softened something in both of them, wearing away old fears like river stones. "Remember when you first came to town? All those protests?" And now Mrs. Turner brings me lunch every Wednesday." Janelle chuckled. "Her husband Eli still grumbles, but he's the first to defend our safety protocols to anyone who asks." The front door burst open as Ava bounded in. "Marisol's here!" And she brought Mr. James from the hardware store with her. "He says the mill order came in early." They carried mugs and plates out to the wide front porch, where Marisol waited, her silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Mr. James stood beside her, his weathered hands holding a manila envelope of invoices. "Thought you'd want these right away," he said, nodding to Janelle. "Biggest order we've handled in years. Mill's keeping half the town busy now." More neighbors appeared as twilight deepened. Eli and his wife strolled by, waving from the sidewalk. A group of apprentices passed, calling out greetings. Darren rode past on his bike, toolbox strapped to the back, headed home for dinner. Ava perched on the porch railing, swinging her legs. "Remember when people used to cross the street to avoid the mill? Now everyone wants to work there." Caleb squeezed Janelle's hand. They'd created something beautiful from the ashes of fear and mistrust. The Veterans Resource Center helped soldiers find their footing. The apprenticeship program gave second chances. But most importantly, the community had remembered how to hope again. Marisol served her cobbler as more folks gathered on the porch. Someone started humming an old hymn. Others joined in, voices carrying across the evening air. Porch lights winked on up and down the street, each one a beacon of welcome. Mr. James cleared his throat. "Never thought I'd see the day. Mill running 3 shifts again. Young folks staying in town instead of leaving. Makes an old man's heart glad." "It's not just the mill," Marisol said softly. "It's the people. We remembered who we really are." Caleb watched the scene with quiet joy. These were his people now, not just neighbors, but family. Janelle leaned against him, her presence as natural as breathing. Ava snuggled between them, cobbler crumbs on her chin. The evening deepened into dusk. Stars emerged overhead while porch lights below cast warm pools of gold. Families walked together. Children played in front yards. And the fear that once divided them felt like a distant memory. Caleb wrapped his arm around Janelle as Ava nestled closer. Together they watched their town glow with renewed life and purpose. Each light represented a story of redemption, a heart turned from suspicion to trust, a hand extended in friendship instead of fear. The mill's whistle sounded in the distance, not an ending, but a reminder that tomorrow would bring another day of honest work and shared purpose, another chance to build something lasting together. They sat in peaceful silence as night settled over Eden's Ford. The porch lights burned steady and strong, beacons of hope in the gathering dark. Caleb held his family close, grateful for every step of the journey that had brought them here. This was their victory. Not just a mill restored, but a community healed. Not just success, but belonging. Not just light, but love that had finally overcome fear. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Caleb Reed, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.